All right, I think we can go ahead and jump right in. Welcome everyone that is joining us virtually. We're excited to have everyone online here today for our next webinar episode. Today we're going to be talking about sorting and containing your herd, bulls included, because that is definitely an advantage for eShepherd. And we want to make sure to highlight it and show you all the things that we can do on the bull side as well. So we're going to start off by introducing our team, and we've got a small number of our team here joining us to share some more information on containment, and we've got some people behind the scenes that are going to be answering some questions. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, you can put them in the question and answer chat, which you can find on the top bar there of your screen. So we'll actively answer those questions in the chat as well as cover them in the webinar, and then we'll have a moment here at the end to answer any of those questions that might still be outstanding. So again, I'll start by introducing our team here today. Cheyenne Lambley is on our customer engagement team. Some of you might have met her already if you're already implementing the technology. Cheyenne is a 5th generation livestock producer out of Burke, South Dakota. Her family actually owns and operates the sale barn up there, so excited to have Cheyenne on the team. Cade Brocker is also on the team. He's a customer success representative for us. So any of those questions or maybe the onboardings, you might have interacted with Cade. Cade is originally from Iowa, actually lives in Tonganoxie, Kansas now, and works out of our headquarters there in Kansas City. So excited to have Cade. He grew up in the Simmental breed and still raises seed stock cattle and a handful of show cattle as well. So excited to have his knowledge and background. And then we have a really special guest, Ashley Haynes, out of Burns, Tennessee, is here with us today. Feel really lucky that she's going to take some time to share some of her experiences with Black Gum Hill Cattle as their cattle manager. She'll give us some insights into their operation, how they use containment and the eShepherd technology, as well as how they've been successful utilizing it in bulls. And I'm Kinsey Freeman. I'm the business development manager. I live in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm actually from Cheyenne, Wyoming originally. Grew up on a fairly diversified livestock operation and excited to be engaging with producers across North America from a lot of different areas. I've already got to see quite a few different parts of the country that I hadn't seen before. So we're going to jump right into kind of what we're looking to accomplish. And this is probably more specific to the complete webinar series that we're launching now. We want you to take away some key things as we work through different topics. Most of all, we want you to be able to see how this technology can impact your operation and your operational goals. Not only how they impact your current goals, but maybe how you shape new goals by implementing the technology. Ultimately, we want to build a network not only with our eShepherd team, because I'm very proud of the team that we offer. Probably from the introductions, you can see from customer engagement to customer success. We have a team full of people that understand production livestock. They understand the everyday stressors, and they're ready to share about a tool that will help maybe mitigate some of those stress points. So that brings us to our first poll. I would like to know a little bit more about your operations. So you should be prompted with a question here. If you could just describe to us what your operation looks like.
Just an FYI, the poll is launching. It's got the spinning circle there. It should have just come up for folks.
Appreciate everyone engaging that poll. It looks like for me, a lot of the results are coming back as either diversified livestock or cow-calf producers. It seems like the cow-calf side of things probably seen the most implementation, and we're hoping as the technology grows and we continue to expand, we'll find different ways that we diversify that implementation. So today, joining us, we have current customers, we have industry partners, and we have producers that are maybe still investigating the technology. So next, I kind of want to talk about Gallagher in general and just a brief background of eShepherd. And then I promise we'll get into the heart of the webinar and talking a touch more about containment. So in general, I like to describe eShepherd as the right arm of an animal management company, and that company being Gallagher, a brand that I'm sure many of you are familiar with prior to eShepherd. Gallagher is still a family-owned business. They've been in business for 88 years and invented the electric fence. So when we think about an animal management company, there's so many tools and resources available under the Gallagher umbrella. And so I really like to highlight that when you become an eShepherd producer, you have so many other tools available to you. With that, we have 88 years of experience investing and developing in technology that the culmination of that is this eShepherd neckband. Particularly the neckband looks a little bit different than maybe some that you see on the marketplace, and that's very intentional. Our design, our hardware, our software was really built with intentionality and incorporating that proven technology that we've been working on for so long. We're in 14 different countries, and we have a really large footprint today that's going to continue to grow. And all of that means, what does eShepherd do for you? I think eShepherd, from a very holistic 1,000-foot view, is going to save you time, labor. It's going to allow you to adapt your operation to different circumstances, whether it be planned or unplanned. We have many customers that deal with maybe some Mother Nature events that they weren't expecting, and they find so many advantages in being able to adapt to those scenarios by utilizing this tool. So that brings us to our next poll before we jump in and visit with Cheyenne a little bit. But we know there's a lot of stress when it comes to production livestock, and we want to know what challenges you're facing. You might not find everything on this list, but if you could just give us a little bit of insight as to the challenges you face and maybe how this tool could help you. Well, we have a fairly wide variety in our responses here. It looks like grazing control, pasture utilization, fenced installation, which kind of goes back to time and labor. But Cheyenne's going to hit on a few pieces when it comes to containment specifically, and maybe how we can mitigate some of these challenges that you're facing today. So Cheyenne, we'll hand it off to you and you can head right in.
Awesome. Thanks, Kenzie. So as Kenzie mentioned, Gallagher being around for 88 years, the design and componentry has been a lot of experience. This product itself has been over 10 years in the making. So how does it work? So you can see in the bottom right-hand corner is the eShepherd neckband. It is a GPS solar enabled neckband. So you're going to install the neckband on your cows and bulls. Any animal weighing over 440 pounds can be installed. So you're going to draw your virtual fence on your computer or your mobile phone. It is going to be relayed up to the cloud and then down to the neckband where it stores those coordinates. So we do have two different types of connectivity. So the first one is going to be our direct to cellular option. So we go off of the LTE-M band of the network. So if you can send and receive a text message, that neckband can communicate. So direct to cellular is the first option. If you do not have adequate cellular coverage, so more of our mountainous and rangy properties, we go in to do a LoRa base station assessment. So that base station is going to relay that signal and act as a transmission point to relay that communication. One key thing to consider with our neckband, the coordinates are stored on the virtual fence or on the neckband for 24 hours. So if they do go out of communication, that's okay. We just need them to come back and check in with the system once every 24 hours. So next, I will show you a few specific examples of the technology in use. So the first example here is showing, you can see in the picture on the left, we have 4 different herds that are grazing along the riverside. This was a more intense grazing situation. They were opening up a new break once every 6 hours. So this is, you can schedule your moves out as far in advance as you wish. So this situation here, you can see the dots on the lower left, the 4 different herds that were grazing down on the riverside. And then on the right-hand side, you can see obviously the water points. So moving their water in this specific scenario. Next, we will touch on the exclusion zones. So when you are drawing your virtual fences, you can have 1 exclusion zone per inclusion zone. So the picture on the left is going to be a screenshot of the mobile app. So you can see the orange solid line around the outside. That's going to be the area where the animals are included. Showing those blue dots would be the animals that are grazing. The heart shape in the middle there is going to be the exclusion zone. So they kind of added some character there, showing that heart shape for their exclusion zone.
That was them saying they love eShepherd, right?
Yes, absolutely. Or maybe it was just Valentine's Day and that was their way of showing their love. But yeah, definitely can design that exclusion zone whichever way you wish. Okay, so with our virtual fence, as I mentioned, every operation, every producer is a little bit different. So knowing that we don't approach this as a one size fits all, we want to know about you, we want to know about your operation and why you're interested in the virtual fencing technology. So a few examples of operations producers that have installed our system include some more intensive grazing. So that first scenario that we showed with the multiple moves a day, you can schedule out your moves as far in advance as you wish. So that's one nice feature. Instead of having to move that polywire multiple times, you can schedule out your moves and not have to worry about maintenance of a polywire or physically being out there to do it. Second example would be some larger scale operations or rangelands, more mountainous areas. So, we turning out in the spring and they're picking up in the fall. Just having that peace of mind of knowing where their herds and their animals are throughout that grazing season. Another example would be cover crops. So in the fall, turning animals out again to clean up some of those cover crops and being able to schedule or, exclude an area that you don't want them in to help clean up in the fall. And then lastly, sorting bulls and also for our cow-calf producers, once the animals have calved, you can draw, a new virtual fence to essentially sort them off or pull them over after they have calved, just knowing it's a tool to use in your management, but knowing once they have calved, you can move those cows over to a calved area. And the same thing with bulls, which I'll show an example of in a couple slides. So this is a current customer just down the road from me here in South Dakota, Jorgensen Land and Cattle. So if you have heard or familiar with Nick Jorgensen, he has an interview on one of our YouTube channels, which is great. Check it out if you haven't already, but he just really points out having the eShepherd system, just having that peace of mind, knowing where his animals are at all time, not having to have anybody in his crew go out over the weekend or during any holidays or anything and having to move polywire, just having the peace of mind, knowing where his cows and bulls are and allowing him to utilize every acre in the pasture. So one example here of sorting bulls specifically. So you can see the paddock on the left is the cows and bulls that were exposed together. So obviously during that season. Now when they went to pull the bulls, they overlap the new virtual fence at the water source. So knowing the cows and bulls are coming back to the water, they drew a new virtual fence for the bulls. And then they kept the cows on the left-hand side. So they were gathering, sorting them by overlapping that water source. I believe there was 100 cows and bulls together, and every animal except two ended up in the correct spot. So very effective and efficient, knowing that pulling bulls can be quite a process, and just another tool that you can use to manage and help with that process. This is an example of a customer in Northwest Iowa, and this is just showing the neckband on the bull. And some of those key advantages with having them on the bull, when you expose your bull, so you could have a group of, cows exposed, a group of heifers exposed. Obviously, you don't want those bulls getting switched or interchanging. So you have that control of knowing exactly where that bull is with which animals, and you're in control of how long and where they are. And then the next slide is just going to show the fitment of the bull neckband. So you can see again, this customer in Iowa, the neckband on the bull, we offer an XL chain kit, just the larger size of the neck. We want to make sure that neckband is fitted properly. We don't want it too loose. We don't want it too tight, but just knowing the larger size of the bull's neck, getting that proper fitment. And obviously it will still receive the cues once it is on the virtual fence line. And we have all the features the same as the cows and the bulls. And we'll go into some of those features a little more in depth next, I think. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so with our pricing, that's going to be another difference in our system. We are a full purchase model. So as I mentioned, over 10 years in the making, we're very confident in our system and the technology. So with our system, you buy it and you are the owner. It does come with a 3-year warranty. So with the cellular system, it's going to be the purchase of the neckband. So you can see the two different price brackets there. If you purchase 20 to 59, the neckband is $300. If you purchase 60 or more, they are $250. And then as far as the data charges go, it is $2 per neckband per month, and that is billed monthly. So as I mentioned, with some of those seasonal allotments or turnout dates, if you have a lease property, if you shut that neckband off, you're obviously not going to receive that charge. So that would be another advantage that we have, and those charges have not changed. With the LoRa system, the neckband price is going to be the same. So $250 for that neckband. First base station, $6,000, additional or $5,000, and then $1.50 per neckband per month for that data charge. Again, billed monthly, not annually. So another key thing to consider, as we know, the environmental factors, a lot can change in this industry very quickly. So not having that annual cost, and you can always shut it off if needed, is another key advantage.
Well, great. We'll hear a little bit more from Cheyenne as we dig in, but appreciate her insights, especially as we just talk about general containment and those advantages. I think she brings up some really good points when we start talking about the pricing, and we mentioned it about that 7 to 10 year lifespan. We know that virtual fencing is an investment, and we're committed to making sure that you see return on value, and that looks different for every operation and what your goals are. So that kind of brings us to the next poll, and what prompts you to adopt new tools. It probably leans a little bit more into what your operational goals are, and what kind of success you want to see in the end by implementing these tools. So if you'd participate in that, we'd love it. Well, it seems like ROI, we're leaning pretty heavy to ROI, which it makes a lot of sense. And like I said, we're very confident in the hardware, in the tools that we can provide in the future. We invest in research and development every year to make sure that we're continuing to develop management tools that'll help you in the long term. So with that, we're going to go into how do we actually use the tool for producers that are already implementing the app and managing their cattle with this tool. You're going to find some refreshers, and for those that are still investigating, I hope that you'll find maybe some more examples of how easy to use this app, whether it be on your desktop or your mobile phone. We really want to expose you to the technology and how easy it is to implement. So with that, we'll pass it over to Cade and he'll explain how to use it.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to go through a few screenshots from our web app today, essentially walking you through how to draw virtual paddocks in the web app and kind of get you set up for rotation. And then later in this segment, we'll go into actually how to draw and activate virtual paddocks to do some of your sorting before Ashley gets into some of the real world points of it. So here we've got everything started out with, we've got our physical fences drawn, which are the white lines here. These are lines that are just for reference. They do not interact with the actual neck bands. And then we've also got a few of our watering points marked here, and then our gate. So I did, excuse me, forget to mark a gate here right at the lower corner of this catch pen right here, but we'll get into that. So we'll just get into how to draw a virtual paddock and all that. So first, you're going to click VPs and then in rotation. And then once it gets you to your in rotation page, we're going to go down here and click create. So this is what a virtual paddock looks like when you're in the middle of drawing it, editing it, things like that. So you essentially just go in, click to drop your points. Once you make your way all the way around your circle or your field, click on your beginning point, and that will close your shape. Down here at the bottom, we've got our total area. So that's the total area that is contained by that virtual paddock. And then we've got your total grazing area. So that's the total area that is inside of your physical fence that is actually available to those animals. And then we've also got the name down here in the lower left. So I definitely recommend coming up with a standard naming convention. That way you know where you've been and where you need to go next, and it makes it a lot easier to actually turn on your virtual paddocks and manage that as well. You'll also notice here that we've got a couple errors when we drew this. So the errors are highlighted here where the points are, and it'll say what the errors are as we get into it. So we're zooming in here on this error point. This error is caused by too narrow of an angle. So this is a safety feature that we have built into our system. Essentially, we don't want these animals getting stuck in a corner, getting any unnecessary stimulus or things like that and getting confused. So the best way to go in and fix this would be to add another point and drag this in to soften that corner. So this next slide is how we went in and fixed that. Essentially just adding in that point, dragging this down to soften that angle, making it a little safer for those animals. Next, we'll zoom into our other, so you'll see that point isn't highlighted anymore and that error went away. So next we'll go up to our other error message. And this is zoomed in on a segment that is too narrow or too short. So the minimum segment length is 5 meters or 5.5 yards or 6 yards. So the easiest way to go in and fix this is just click on one of the points and extend it out to make it a little longer. And you'll notice here, this is something else I like to point out when drawing a virtual paddock. This watering point is right in this fence line. So rather than taking this virtual paddock right up along this fence line, we extended it out to give some buffer zone so animals are always able to access that watering point. We definitely don't want them being kept away from water or anything like that. So always important to remember, make sure you've got plenty of buffer zone around your watering points, especially if they are in a fence line. So from here, we're zoomed out. Everything looks good. We don't have any error messages. We've got all of our points drawn. We'll come down here to the lower left and we'll rename this virtual paddock. We call this our South AI pasture. And then we named it South AI 1. So This is the first iteration of this rotational grazing scheme. And from there, we can go in and start to build our rotation. So the easiest way to build a rotation once you've already drawn your first virtual paddock is going into your VPs in rotation and then select using this orange checkbox, select that virtual paddock, and then come down here to click copy. So this is going to create an exact copy of your current virtual paddock that you've got drawn. So you don't have to go in and add all these finer points, and you can just focus on extending, expanding. So you'll see that it has that you've created a copy. It'll rename it and add the -VP001 at the end, and it'll continue to do that with 02, 03, and so on. But essentially all you do to add more area is just drag and drop your points to add that area, and from there you can click save. And we actually went in and renamed this to South AI 2. So we've got all of our virtual paddocks drawn here, and there's a couple examples in this of some ways that you can essentially draw your expansions. So you can do just a straight across line, or if you have a little bit more unconventional shaped paddock, you could do like pie slices or things like that. And you can also use this sort of stair step method. So if we look at South AI 3, this is the virtual paddock that is contained in this pink line here. We stair stepped up here, and then in that transition, we would go to South AI 4 and open up that next allotment to give them that space. So that's essentially how you get started with building a rotational scheme, drawing your virtual paddocks. It's always important to remember all these animals are going to be contained within this pink line. So next we'll really get into using virtual paddocks to sort your animals. So there's a bunch of different reasons that you might want to do this. Obviously for sorting off bulls. In our case, we do a round of AI on our cows to begin with, and then we'll turn our bulls out. So if you catch cows in heat and you want to pull them off or sort them off to get them into AI, another solution for this. So first, what we're going to do is go in and create a virtual paddock that contains our catch pen. So this pen we've got right here is what we call the shade pen. They're always going up in here for water. It's a natural place for them to come. We also feed them a little bit of grain and all those things. So they're used to coming in here. We're going to draw our virtual paddock around here, and then there is a gate right here in the lower corner. So we've got that one drawn. We named it the Shade Pen Virtual Paddock, and we are going to move into our example here. So you'll see we're in the herds tab. We've got our bull notated in blue, and then the cows are all these pink icons. You can tell they've all got a virtual paddock activated for them because they have a solid edge around their icons here on the map. And then you'll see that we have that South AI 3 virtual paddock activated by the solid orange line. And then you can see in the herds tab, the name of the virtual paddock, the name of the herd, and the number of head that are in those virtual paddocks. So they're all out grazing, whether we call them in and give them some feed or they just come in for water on their own. We'll wait for them to come up into the virtual paddock and the catch pen. So if I was going out to do this and was going to give them a little bit of supplemental grain, call them in, I would then go in and for the bull, activate that catch pen virtual paddock. So our virtual paddocks are one-way gates. It will allow them in and work to contain them. So it won't give them any stimulus for entering in. It will only try to contain them. So we went ahead, all the animals are up in the catch pen. We turned on the shade pen virtual paddock to contain that bull. So this will contain the bull, allow the rest of the animals to go back out and graze when they choose. That's activated, and then we'll move. All these animals have come out. The bull has been contained, and he's ready to be pulled out, put into his winter pass pen and all those things. So from here, we've shut the gate. The animal's physically contained. and then we will go ahead and send an off command to deactivate that virtual paddock. You can see that the animal here has a dashed line around it, meaning it doesn't have an active virtual paddock. And that line is a thin dashed yellow line here, notating that that's off. So now that animal's safe to pull out from that virtual paddock and take him wherever you need to go. So that's it for me on my end. Oop, you're on mute, Kinsey.
It was hesitant to turn it off, I guess.
Mm.
I appreciate the feedback, and CADE is available for anyone that wants to explore it a bit more, that is already utilizing the technology. That's another highlight of our team, is because we have our start in the Southern Hemisphere. Whenever the North American team is offline, our Southern Hemisphere team is online. So that gives us the ability to practically offer 24/7 support. So we want you to be successful, whether it's answering just general questions or learning how to use a new tool, or if you have something urgent, we want to make sure that we're available to you. So that brings us into our next really exciting piece. Again, we have Ashley Haynes here with us today. She is the farm manager for Black Gum Hill Cattle out in Tennessee, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about their experience utilizing the technology. So I'll just open it up to Ashley to first share a bit more about their operation, some of the goals that they had when they were exploring the technology, and then we might dive a little deeper after that. So the floor is yours, Ashley. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, everyone. We're a 100-head operation in Burns, Tennessee. We do commercial beef cows. Historically, we have used the poly fence to rotational graze, and it's very labor intensive. So we were looking for a way to do this more efficiently, and we began using the eShepherd virtual fence last fall, and the changes that we've been able to see this spring have been awesome. Just as a whole, it's been awesome, but you can really see the return in the how much further you can stretch your grass has been, and we're going through a drought right now, so you really can't tell that in our pastures, which has been awesome, because if you go to neighboring farms right now, the grass is bare, it's dry, it's pretty rough in places, and being able to implement this right now during this drought period has been really wonderful.
Awesome. We've got maybe a little bit more visual. If you want to explain to us kind of how you manage your herd and kind of navigate those different paddocks that you design. I know you talk about rotational grazing quite a bit. So yeah, if you kind of want to describe a little bit more about your movements and what that looks like on the schedule.
Yeah. So right now we're doing every day. We move them, sometimes several times a day. We don't really have a laid out schedule right now. We're still kind of manually doing things. That's the best way I know to put it, because we're still trying to figure out the ropes. And I think also because we're going through a drought, it gives us the ability to maybe give them a much larger paddock than we had planned, because we don't want to scalp anything. And of course, we're just rotating around our water sources and moving from pasture to pasture. And yeah, so.
Okay. Well, we popped up that poll and it talked about the different challenges that we face. And I know you talked a bit about the labor challenge that you were facing when having to string wire out. I guess for you, it's easy to look at what the cost of physical fence is. It's easy to put a dollar figure to that. I know we had talked a little bit earlier about what it looks like, maybe just in terms of different points of stress that are harder to put a dollar number to, or different times that it free up time for you to have a bit more balance. So talk about just kind of the benefits when it comes to time and maybe the mental stressors that it's relieved for you. Oh, we might have lost Ashley. Well, that's okay. We visited with Ashley a bit earlier, and she had shared, stories of being able to have more balance and free time, less stress when it comes to just understanding where her cattle are, being able to balance more. She's got kids running around that she's able to spend more quality time with because she's not spending as much time out stringing wires. So definitely appreciate her insights. And I know that there's a ton of stories out there, similar sentiment from a lot of customers that are utilizing the technology. So we'll jump back over to Cheyenne here. She's just going to share a couple more highlights for us, and then we'll dig into some more questions if anyone has them.
Perfect. Thanks, Kenzie. So as Kenzie mentioned, once we do have the neck bands on and installed, what does the training period look like? So you can see on the slide here, the white lines are representing a physical fence. The pink line is representing the virtual line. So you can see the pink box on the outside of the white fence. So when we're training, we just want one virtual fence line. So when the cattle are interacting with that line, they are learning those cues and what they mean. So once they are on the virtual fence line, they receive a 5-second high-pitch audio tone. If they continue through that inclusion zone, then they would receive a 3-second pulse, which is emitted through the chain. So when we're training, we have that one virtual line. We're watching that audio to pulse ratio. So we want that at 80% or above. So meaning 80% of the time they hear that audio tone, they come back in the inclusion zone, they don't continue through that boundary. They can receive up to 3 rounds of that audio tone and pulse, and then you would receive a notification if they were to escape. But obviously, as we're training, we say 7 to 10 days. There's different factors to consider. Obviously, your herd size, your training paddock, and the area that they're in. But we're watching that audio to pulse ratio. 7 to 10 days usually is the training window. And then obviously you can see within that pink box, there is a water source. So starting with one virtual line, and then as they start interacting, adding more lines and watching that audio to pulse ratio are going to be the key things when we're training the herd after installing the neck bands. Perfect. And then some other features to point out. So as Kinsey had mentioned, the track map. So on our web and mobile app, we have a track map. So you can click on your bull. You can see the tracks and exactly where that bull has been. So if you have an ornery bull or your neighbor calls and says, hey, I think your bull is out, you can go straight to your app. You can click on the track of that bull and see exactly where that bull is. Also, as I mentioned before, the track being a tool for you to utilize, you can, kind of do your own calculating. But once your bull is exposed to that herd, having those tracks and having that, tighter window. I have talked to producers that have used our system for a couple breeding seasons now, and they're saying they're seeing, the same percentages as far as bred animals, but having a tighter calving window and period because those bulls are being exposed and contained in that area. The map on the right is going to be the heat map. So that is another feature that we have on the web and mobile app. You can click on the heat map and you can see exactly where that herd has been grazing, where they're located. So again, just a couple of tools to utilize when you are managing your herd and specifically those bulls. Perfect. And then, like, as I mentioned previously, for our cow-calf producers, one of the key things, a lot of producers have questions about the calves. So we're relying on that herd mentality of that calf is going to go off and graze. It's going to come back to its mom and bed down for the night. Allowing that calf to graze out in front of the herd, getting that fresher forage, seeing greater gains. At this point, all analytical data, but I've spoken to producers in Montana and over in Oregon, seeing, greater pounds and greater time spent per pasture, just because we can really control the grazing and utilize each acre. So some key things for our cow-calf guys are going to be the gains and keeping those calves healthy and exposed to the fresher forage and overall herd health as well. All right, all right, back to you, Kenzie.
Yeah, that's great insight. I know for every cattle guy and girl on here, it's definitely one of the more stressful times of year is the calving season. So if we can have a better idea and more evidence behind exposure and what that calving window is going to look like, it's definitely helpful. So we'll move on to our final poll, which is what would be the most helpful after today? So Jake's going to pop that up for us, and we're going to continue to explore topics for future webinars. If you ever have questions, be sure to reach out to our customer success team, or if you have ideas for webinars, we're always open to things that you're seeing more prominently, things you'd like to learn about more. So make sure you share those with us. We're getting some feedback here on our last poll. All right, case studies from similar operations. So luckily, we have quite a few of these, and we're developing more as we get more and more customers onboarded. I think oftentimes a question that we get is, how do I know which technology fits my operation best? Well, luckily, if you're here on our eShepherd webinar, we have a really diverse portfolio of producers that have implemented our technology. And if you can't find the resource at our help center, on our webinars, or on our YouTube channel, we would be happy to connect you with a producer that might have similar goals, similar terrain to you. So also, return on investment. Again, a lot of that goes back to what your operational goals are and what you'd like to do after you implement this tool. Those goals can change based on how you implement the technology as well. So those are conversations that are really good examples. It's easy to compare physical fence versus virtual fence and see what that cost comparison is. But really, until we get down to the bottom line of what you want to do with your operation, we want to make a personal connection and show you exactly how this tool can show your operation return on investment. So that could look a little bit different based on the operation, but we're happy to be involved in those conversations with you. So I guess we'll open up any additional questions that we have here. It looks like we've got some happening in the chat that we've been trying to keep up on. Let's see here. Does the mobile app work on an Android? Do you kind of want to talk a little bit, Cade, about the app features, desktop versus mobile app, kind of what the access points are there?
Absolutely. So yes, we do have our mobile app is supported on iPhone and Android. You can find links to those in our help center, as well as just searching eShepherd in your app store on your phone. There's a lot of functionality to our mobile app. There are very few things that you can't do on the mobile app that you can do on the web app. You can do everything from drawing new virtual paddocks, or adding in your watering points and other landmarks. You can do that using your location. So basically, when you're out in the field, if you're standing at a watering point or maybe a hole in your physical fence, whatever it may be, you can drop your or use that to or tell it to use your location, and it'll drop that point there. We also have a lot of customers that use that to bale graze. So they'll go out and set their bales during the winter, and then they'll go add their points when they're standing at those bales to make sure that when they do draw their virtual paddocks, their VPs contain the right bales and exclude the right ones. So a lot of functionality, a lot of different uses and all those are gone over in our help center. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and we can help you walk through those as well. So
maybe just a quick follow-up, Cade, while we've got you on here. We've got a question from McGuire. I apologize that your first name isn't on there, but he's asking how much sunlight does each neckband require?
So our neck bands are meant to be self-sufficient. They have solar panels on both sides. So you don't have to break them down, pull out batteries, charge them, things like that. As long as they have at least a few hours of sunlight a day, they should be able to keep up with demand and all those things and keep their battery healthy. The best thing to do is when you first get your neck bands, set them out in the sun and let them charge for 2 to 3 days. If you've got, cloud cover, things like that, set them out for a week just to make sure you're able to get them fully charged and set up for success before you deploy them. So essentially, if you're grazing in some shaded areas, as long as they have time to get out into full sun and get some charge to them, they'll be fine. So they are meant to be able to virtually fence for up to 3 days with complete darkness and not getting any sunlight. So they are definitely, they're meant to be out in the open and used in a whole variety of use cases. So.
And they're still effective in cold temperatures?
Correct. Yeah. So we've got customers all over North America that use them over the winter, essentially going in, they're bale grazing over the winter in very cold temperatures. We do have some different battery saving techniques that we recommend for grazing over the winter, just in terms of extending the check-in time to help save battery and some things like that. And we have some extra precautions that we watch for just from a customer success side and all that stuff to make sure everything's healthy and working the way it should be. So.
Okay. Well, we have another kind of interesting comment about bulls that are trained on virtual fences and whether they'd be for lease. That might not be something that we could probably directly tell you or solve, but this webinar and all of the resources that we have available is truly to start to build a network. So you can interact with other producers and that potentially gets resolved just through that network. So definitely a great question. And I know Brandon Arpan had mentioned there is a Facebook user group, so that if you want to go get involved in that group and ask questions and maybe find a bull for lease that is virtually trained. So trying to work through some of these. Cheyenne, we had a question here from Nathan. How do collars hold up, or neck bands hold up physically to feeding in concrete bunks? So if you could just talk about the durability of the collars.
Yeah, absolutely. So our neck bands are manufactured in New Zealand. They do go through a concrete mixer test. So they're very robust. They're very durable. They can withstand that. We know we have customers that are feeding out of bunks, round bale feeders as well. Just obviously knowing if you are feeding out of a bunk, that wear and tear is going to be different than an animal that's out grazing in the pasture. But yeah, we had some customers that have shared some photos, and once they are on the animals, obviously bunks interaction, but if you're hauling them, or in a truck or running them through a chute, that's one of the things that comes back to our design, and that being very robust, and with able to withstand the very diverse conditions that our animals go through. So yes, I do have a few photos of some customers that have used them feeding out of concrete bunks. Obviously, just a different grazing situation, but definitely can be done.
And I guess follow up to that, we had an additional question about the water resistance, if you want to hit
Yep.
on that as well.
Yep. So IPX7, they can be submerged in 3 feet for 30 minutes. This last spring, we were in Montana. We have a customer that takes in some summer grass cattle, stockers. So the animals were standing out in a dam. They were out in the water. The neck band was submerged. So IPX7, we haven't had any issues as far as water aggression in tanks or standing out in water.
Okay, awesome. We also have a question from Colt High on what new features is Gallagher working on for the eShepherd neck bands, monitoring health in animals or calving status, heat detection, etc. So I would
Go
say
ahead.
that these are all things that we are developing. As much as possible, trying to utilize the accelerometer that's already in the neck band to evaluate different behaviors, then would lead us to understand a little bit better where they're at as far as, status. Are they in heat, calving? I wouldn't say that we probably have a real specific timeline, but we know that all of those factors are really important to producers, and we would love to be able to be confident in making those calls because we're sure that they would benefit you. So those are things that are in the works, and a lot of that is already built into the hardware. It's more on the software development. So when you purchase the neck bands today, they're going to be capable when we implement those tools. I did see another question. How accurate is the terrain on the app? Cheyenne, I don't know, this might be a good opportunity if you could real quickly just talk about how we analyze different properties and determine from connectivity to what it looks like to meeting their grazing operations or grazing goals.
Yes, excuse me. So as far as the terrain on the map, we do have, so obviously we would do our initial assessment with the direct to cellular or the LoRa system, and then determine how many base stations would be needed on the property. So we have a team that specializes in this assessment, and we use Google Earth, so we can turn the map layers on and off to see how many base stations would need. As far as the app goes, on the app, there is 4 different map layers that you can turn on and off on the property. And I guess, Cade, maybe you have some more insight as far as the app goes. Maybe.
Yep. So the mobile app is definitely going to be more up to date in terms of some of the, what's actually in your map or what's showing up on your property. So it uses whatever operating system that your phone runs off of. So Apple Maps, Google Maps, things like that. That's going to be the most up to date. We do have different map layers or different maps on our web app that you can switch between that have different variations of update. They're a little more updated and some of those things. So we are always constantly working to get some of those features updated and make improvements on those as well. So I did see a question about contour lines in here. We don't have the ability to add contour lines as of right now, but that is definitely in the work log to get updated and be able to add in those contour lines. So
awesome. Yeah, I guess I just piggyback on the accuracy of the maps and how we evaluate that. obviously, Cheyenne said we have a dedicated team and we work really hard. I think that's something where we truly have an advantage, is understanding the topography and terrain and making that assessment so you can feel confident in what your connectivity is. And I think a lot of that has to do with the feedback as we're working through the process of getting you on board to eShepherd. We're going to have those type of conversations. We're going to understand your property. We're going to understand what your goals are, what level of connectivity and communication you need to really have success with your goals. So those are all conversations, and it's not just a blanket, every one size fits all. We really tried to dedicate some time to making sure that your operation, that your connectivity is specific to your operation. Okay, we've got another question from Keith. I know it would depend on the bull, but do users find the virtual paddock sufficient to keep a bull from looking to join another paddock with different cows? So I know we have a ton of different stories, and I was actually out in Oregon visiting. We had an event out there, and I was out visiting some customers. And Daniel and Kimmy Lichtig were showing me around, and they actually were very confident that the neck bands were more effective on the bulls when it came to containment than anything else, and they were very high on the containment on everything else. They just think that the bulls they've had bulls that stand right across from each other with a virtual fence in between them and never cross. And that's one scenario. We know that we can have different scenarios, but it seems like that's more common than not to have that type of feedback from customers. So if you're questioning kind of what that looks like for your operation specifically, we'd love to follow up or connect you to producers that have had that type of effectiveness with bulls. Brandon's saying in the chat that he's had success too, so I'm sure he'd love to follow up and visit more about what he's seen on his operation. What do we have here? How accurate are the locations, the GPS drift? Cade, if you want to just talk about what we see most commonly as far as accuracy of the virtual fence.
Yeah, so just like with any other GPS product, if there are solar flares, things like that, different interferences that can cause a slight amount of drift, especially if you're a row cropper and you're using a GPS. And I know there were some solar flares here last spring while everyone was planting. I know there were a lot of complaints about some wavy corn rows and all those things. So there is a little bit of drift in those cases, but you will notice, as if you are rotational grazing and things like that, you will be able to see a fine line between your current virtual paddock and that next break. So they do get very accurate, especially as they get closer to a virtual paddock boundary. That GPS location is updating a lot more regularly to make sure that they contain those animals. So there are some other things that could cause drift, or would be if you have a watering point that's underneath a tin roof or shed, things like that. Definitely want to make sure you account for some buffer zone around those when you're drawing your virtual paddocks. But when they are out virtually fencing and all those things, they are very accurate. So.
All right, awesome. Well, we only have a couple more minutes here. So Jake, if you want to pop up that last slide that has some contact information. If you have more questions, always feel free to reach out to the customer success team. For those of you that have already implemented the technology, they are available, happy to work with you, not only on answering questions, but if you have different things in mind and want to know if the app is capable, they are happy to assist. If you have not implemented the technology and are interested in visiting more about eShepherd specifically to your operation, reach out to our customer engagement team, send an email to eShepherd.inquiries@gallagher.com. And then there's always those resources available online. Can't emphasize that enough. We've got a great help center. We've got a ton of stories from producers that that are implementing the technology, follow the QR code, visit our website, and if you can't find what you're looking for, always feel free to reach out and we will get you linked up with the answers that you need. So with that, I appreciate everyone joining us on the webinar today. Look out for the next webinar topic and date. That'll be coming soon. And we're happy to visit with you going forward. So thank you everyone for joining us today.